Hey guys, it's me. I'm back recording from home. Honestly, I just think it's so much easier. There's no interruptions, the internet's faster, the lighting is better. It's just a whole slew of things. So I'm probably going to start recording things from home. We're going to go over our next section in Tuesdays with Morrie. And so the first chapter that we're going to talk about is the second Tuesday. And the subtitle of that chapter is The Second Tuesday We Talk About Feeling Sorry for Yourself. So in this one, we learn a little bit more about what's going on with Mitch's life. And that is that things are still, the writers are still on strike. So he finds himself having a lot more time to spend with Morrie and to do these interviews and, eventually write this book. And Mitch said in the beginning, an audio that we heard in class, that the reason why he started writing this book, in particular, was to help Morrie pay for his medical costs that he was going to be incurring with the ALS diagnosis and everything that comes with that. Later in this section, we'll see that Morrie has to get on oxygen and things like that. And you have to pay for all those things. You have to pay for the delivery of those things and all that. So we see a little behavioral change in Mitch, which we have since the beginning. We know that he was sort of a workaholic and very much into his work. And, we generally think of that in the American society as not a bad thing. And I'm not going to say that it is a bad thing, but we can see how we lose some of our human interactions because of that. And one of a major behavioral change here that we see is that Mitch no longer rents a cell phone or gets a cell phone for his travels when he goes back and forth to see Morrie. And that really shows us that he values now more of a human connection. He's not necessarily as worried about work, which, to be fair, he has the luxury of not having to worry about work because they're on strike. But it's more about the human connection now and less about being a workaholic. We also see that, once again, that he's bringing in food to Morrie. Food is always a good thing. And that's a little motif, like kind of a little symbol in this novel. It's always a good thing. When he has food with Morrie, when he brings food to Morrie, it's always a joyous thing that they do together. They celebrate around food. And I know that my friends and I, we do the same thing. And we see here how Morrie is coping with his disease, with his terminal illness. And he says that he allows himself to mourn every day if he needs to. He says if he wakes up, if he feels like he needs to cry, he does so. He cries for a moment and then he moves on, because he doesn't want to spend the rest of his days sad. He wants to get as much happiness as he can because he knows that his days are limited. And we see that he's starting to get a little worse off, and Mitch has started to chip in a little bit. At first, Mitch was kind of just like an old visitor from Morrie's professor days and just an old friend. And then he got to visiting a little bit more, and then he started making notes on their conversations and stuff like that. And now we see that he's helping Morrie even more. He's bringing food to him, as we already said, but he's also helping Morrie from the physical aspect. Morrie's whole army, his team of helpers, Mitch is now one of them. And I don't think it doesn't seem like much to think of it outright by itself, but it's almost like Mitch is like a son to Morrie in this aspect. When you care for someone like you would care for a child or something like that, you do tend to become a little bit closer to that person. It's a labor of love, as people call it. It's a popular idiom. And we can see that the relationship is going from sort of a little bit closer student, professor, friend to friend, to almost like that son, parent, which is okay, mentor, mentee. Then we also see this little psychological tests here that we've got about trust and like the trust fall and things like that. And Morrie's big life lesson, the extended metaphor throughout this whole book, is that in order to ever trust people, you have to be less cynical. You have to have faith. You have to open yourself up that trust can even exist in order for you to have that trust. And I think that's kind of like the life lesson of this chapter. Of course, he mentions the touchy-feely things. You know, Mitch is not really comfortable with the emotional talk like Morrie is. Morrie is very open to his emotions. He's kind of a loving guy, as where Mitch is more numbers and no emotions and work and all that stuff. And then we see that they're kind of stuck with each other for a while, at least. They're Tuesday people, and they like that. And that's what they do. They meet on Tuesdays, and they have these life lessons and the back and forth with each other. Okay, so the next chapter is the third Tuesday, subtitle being We Talk About Regrets. I like to read a line before we get into talking about it. Says, I was losing Morrie. We were all losing Morrie. His family, his friends, his ex-students, his fellow professors, his pals from the political discussion groups that he loved so much, his former dance partners, all of us. And I suppose the tapes, like photographs and videos, are a desperate attempt to steal something from death's suitcase. Like that metaphor there, and that personifying death. So things are getting a little bit more serious as we're visiting Morrie on Tuesday. We've gone from, and when I say we, I mean the author here, Mitch Albom. He's gone from, making the occasional note and writing things down to now tape recording. And he wasn't really sure how Morrie was going to react to that. And Morrie said, please, I want people to know my story. And furthermore, I want to teach lessons. I am a teacher. Morrie's a professor like me, and he enjoys teaching. And if we write this book, if we record all these lessons, it's a way for Morrie to keep teaching even after he's gone. And that's every person that reads this book and learns his life lessons. Morrie will forever be a teacher. I'm making these videos. They'll probably forever be on the internet teaching. I'm making these for my students, but there's nothing to say that students from across America won't come across this video and learn. Okay. So, the second question here, it says, what did Mitch wonder about Morrie when he saw the episode of Nightline? Which is that he wondered if Morrie had any regrets. And he wanted to ask Morrie about a whole slew of different things about life and adult life and all these things that Morrie thought, because he was on his deathbed. And Morrie tells us here that no one really starts paying attention until they're dying. Everybody knows they're dying, but no one, eventually, but nobody wants to face the fact that death is coming. We're all in denial. And I can see why. It's a coping mechanism. We don't want to think every single day, that would cause a lot of fear and anxiety and depression if we thought every day that we were going to die. But Morrie said that's almost a weakness in a way as well, because we stay in denial. We don't believe that we're going to die, so therefore we don't really pay attention to things, the important things, the human things. We put work and school and all that in the forefront and making money in the big house and big car, but we forget about maybe calling our mom or our grandma. And that's the important thing that Morrie is trying to get across to us. We open the chapter once again with food, bringing in groceries, which is the motif. We keep saying that. We talk about regrets, but then we also talk about a very specific list of life purposes and life lessons that Morrie wants to educate Mitch about, and Mitch wants to ask him about. And that list is as follows: death, fear, aging, greed, marriage, family, society, forgiveness, and a meaningful life. Okay, and I know myself, when I was your age in high school, I thought that I had seen a lot and maybe not knew it all, but knew a lot. And I learn more and more every day as an adult. I learn more and more every day. And then we come to the class memory here, and we learn about Mitch's graduate thesis, which is going to be on football, which is important because he is, in his future, he's going to be a sports writer. And he talks about how it's been ritualized, and it's not just a sport anymore. You know, we have clothes, we have jewelry, we have Super Bowl Sunday is almost a national holiday. We have food, snacks, themes, songs, all these things. And Morrie says, gee whiz, you're kind of onto something here. You might need to become an author. And of course he does. Another quote I enjoy says Morrie, my old professor wasn't in the self-help business. He was standing on the tracks, listening to death's locomotive whistle, and he was very clear about the important things in life. Like that metaphor, death's locomotive whistle, and that personification as well. He's very clear about the important things of life. That doesn't include work or education or things like that. It's not education in the traditional sense. So education is important, learning is important, but not necessarily reporting to school every day at 7 a.m. and doing all this homework and things like that. That's what Morrie wants to kind of teach. It's about humans. It's about learning from each other. And, there are some things that can't be taught in school that are just as important as math and language arts. So in the audiovisual part 2, we find out that Morrie, which we could probably already guess this, Morrie's a very extroverted guy. He likes people. He enjoys being surrounded by people. And he's talking a little bit about his emotions. And he says, here's how my emotions go. When I have people and friends here, I'm very up. The loving relationships maintain me. But there are days when I am depressed. Let me not deceive you. I see certain things going and I feel a sense of dread. What am I going to do without my hands? What happens when I can't speak? Swallowing. I don't care much about. They feed me through a tube anyway, so what? But my voice, my hands, they're an essential part of me. I talk with my voice. I gesture with my hands. This is how I give to people. Maybe I'll just have everyone ask me yes or no questions. Okay? It shows that Morrie still has trying to have a bit of a sense of humor up until the day that he died. And I think part of the reason why he also has a little sense of humor here is because this chapter opens with the second time that Nightline and Ted Koppel has been over. We watched those first 2 interviews in class before the shutdown. And everyone's just more relaxed. Ted Koppel's not a stranger anymore. And Morrie's not a stranger to Ted Koppel anymore. So they can kind of laugh as much as they can about the situation. I know right now with the shutdown, I'm taking it very serious. I'm not going out and because I want to make sure that I'm not sick and I don't want to get anybody sick. But there have been a lot of memes shared about Daddy DeWine, and I just think that we can look upon sad things as long as we're not offending anybody. We can look upon sad things and we can hold both emotions simultaneously. We can take things serious, we can be sad, but we can also joke about things, because if we don't take time to laugh every once in a while, we're just going to be even more sad, depressed, and full of anxiety that we already are. But we can see here that there are some things starting to go. The L sounds get caught in his throat. He said that Morrie says that people necessarily don't see it, but he can see it. He can feel that he's going. And he reads a letter from a teacher, and we saw this video clip in class as well before the shutdown. And this teacher had a whole classroom full of kids that had lost a parent. And the reason why Morrie choked up during this, and when we saw it on the video clip, is because he had lost his mother at a very young age. And he sort of never got over it. And I don't think that it's necessarily possible to get over a death. Death will always be a fresh wound. It happens to us so much. Pets die, family members die, friends die. I still can't handle it, I guess, for lack of a better term. I still get emotional. I still cry when someone dies, or like if a pet dies or something like that. It doesn't matter how much It happens to us. We still feel emotions, and we're allowed to feel those emotions. And we see that Morrie is, every time he looks in the mirror, he's faced with his own death. His physical condition is going downhill. We just talked about how he couldn't swallow, but he's not moving his hands as much when he talks because he has less physical energy. It takes a lot of energy for him to just get his feelings out, let alone do all this stuff. And then he talks about his friend Morrie Stein. And Morrie Stein is sort of the connection with Nightline, because Morrie Stein sent Morrie Schwartz his work, his aphorisms, off to the Boston Globe. And then Nightline picked up from the Boston Globe, and that's how Ted Koppel got introduced to him, you know, through the Boston Globe and all that. And he said that his friend Morrie Stein is kind of being faced with his own aging and mortality as well, because he's starting to lose his hearing. And he says, you know, maybe we'll just hold hands and squeeze, and that's how we'll communicate with each other, because eventually he's not going to be able to hear, and I'm not going to be able to speak. And I think that when people are friends or spouses or close family members, something like that, they always find a way to communicate, and they always find a way to say, I love you.
Well, there were lots of letters. This is from a teacher in a small Pennsylvania town called Perkiomen Valley Middle School. And she has 4 girls and 5 boys, 10 to 13 years of age. Each of these kids lost a parent, and she's trying to get them talk about it in a group. And the kids, especially the boys, are having a very hard time talking about it. And this is what I said. Dear Barbara Cott, that's the teacher, I was moved by your letter, this is me writing, and feel that the work you are doing with the children who have lost a parent is very important. I also lost a parent at an early age. I lost my mother, and you see, I still can cry about it, at age 8. And it's quite a blow to me. I wish I had had a group like yours where I would have been able to talk about my sorrows and share, even though it might have been hard to talk about my feelings. I would have joined your group because I was so lonely. Right now, I find I can't do it alone either. But I have my friends around me to keep me to help me talk about my illness. I send each of you and all of you as a group my warm thoughts and hope for your continued work together to help each other. As I talk with my friends, I will think of you talking with yours. Warmly, Morrie.
Morrie, that was 70 years ago that your mother died. And it still chokes you up. And when you read your own words about how lonely you were back then, that's still a very real and present pain with you, isn't it?
It goes on.
The pain. You know what strikes me as so strange about that? You are so brave and cheerful about your own condition now. And I just wonder why it is that something that happened so long ago is so much more painful to you.
Ted, that has nothing to do with bravery. All it has to do with feeling. I don't feel any less powerful just because I've cried about my mother's death. As a matter of fact, tears, for me, strengthen me. They don't weaken me. when I cry about a lot of things all at once, and it includes my own demise. I get precipitated by the ancient, if you want to put it that way, 70-year-old pain. It gets precipitated by my identification with these young kids who are suffering in the same way I am. And sometimes, believe it or not, I cry for the pain of the world. Not often enough, I'm afraid, but there's a hell of a lot of pain in this world.
Okay, so the professor, if you didn't pick up on this title, by the end of the chapter, it tells us why Morrie wants to be a teacher, a professor. He said it's because 2 reasons. Number 1, he doesn't like blood, so he can't go into the medical field, even though he wants to help people. He can't do that because he doesn't like the sight of blood. And he wants to go into a job that helps people, so he doesn't want to exploit anybody. He doesn't want to make money off of the sweat of others, because we saw that his dad worked in a fur factory, and he would go and sweat while the boss set up in his ivory tower office and made money off of his workers. You know, the Waltons of Walmart do the same thing. Corporate McDonald's does the same thing. People who work minimum wage work very hard 40 hours a week. Not even minimum wage, just laborers. But the boss is the one that collects the big money. And Morrie said he didn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be a boss like that. People go to work for you. I'm not saying that being a boss is a bad thing, because people go to work for you and that's their option. But Morrie just said that he just couldn't himself feel like doing that, and he wanted to help people. We also see a little bit about Morrie's past life here when he was a child. He grew up during the Great Depression, a very hard time. He grew up in a very impoverished family. His mother died when he was young. We already talked about that. But his brother also got polio, which is a pretty serious condition. Sometimes your lungs can shut down and you can't breathe anymore, can't walk anymore, can't use your muscles anymore. So that was very hard. And one of the best things that happened to Morrie, in his opinion, is when his stepmom came in, Ava, because he needed that mother figure in his life, especially with his dad working so much. And she really taught him a lot about emotions and how to express emotions and how to love. Because up before this, when it came to like illness and death and poverty and all that stuff, he just ignored it because he didn't really know emotionally how to deal with it. He wasn't very emotionally mature. But Ava taught him how to be emotionally mature, and he's forever thankful for it. The one bad thing was that his dad insisted on raising his little brother David to think that Ava was his mom. And that hurt Morrie a lot because he felt like he wanted to remember his biological mother as well, who was also the biological mother of David, just that David was so young. So that was another thing that kind of grew him up fast with that emotional matureness. He had to be emotionally mature for himself because his family was impoverished and he had to deal with that, because the memory of his biological mother was being ignored. He had to deal with that. And I think that's probably another reason why that wound never healed up, because he didn't deal with it. And neither did his father. You know, Ava came in about a year later, which was really good for him, but he never actually got the proper memorial dealing with his mom's death. He just kind of pushed it down, which I do with some of my emotions as well. And that's probably why we saw him being so raw in the last chapter, being so emotionally upset about his mother still, because his dad didn't show emotion, and he never really mourned his mother properly in his head and in his heart as well.
Because, I mean, the one thing you left out in your resume there a moment ago is you've been a teacher.
That's right.
All your life.
All my life.
And this, in a sense, is the biggest teaching assignment you've ever taken on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You're trying to help as many people as you can,
That's right.
even as you help yourself.
Well, absolutely.
All right. As you talk to people of different backgrounds, different intellectual backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, what you and I are discussing here is the one thing
That's universal.
that's universal.
Absolutely.
The one thing we're all going to
Yeah.
have to confront.
That's right.
And what I'm looking from you, or looking for from you, Guru,
Oy vey.
Oy vey,
When you
yeah.
call me a guru.
what I'm looking for here is a universal answer. Now, you know, maybe that's a little too tough for you.
The universal answer is this. If I had to give you one statement that people could work on, is accept what is. Accept what is. Do not fight what's going on. Accept it. And by accepting it, you might die with inner peace. If you keep fighting it, you'll scream and rage like Dylan Thomas suggested. Rage, rage, rage at the dying of the light. Now, some people may want to die that way. That's okay. Other people may want to go crawl into a corner and die. That's okay too, if that's the way they want it. I'm saying, if you don't know how you want to die, or if you feel the way you do know is not satisfying, then the most important principle is acceptance of your state, because that's who you are and what you are at that moment.
And then we're getting to our last chapter of this video section, which is the fourth Tuesday. The fourth Tuesday we talk about death. And actually, I'm going to jump to the end of the chapter first, is where we talk about Lou Gehrig, which we talked about Lou Gehrig in class. He was a baseball player. And ALS disease was called Lou Gehrig's disease for a while. And in his speech, when Lou Gehrig left, we talked about this speech in our very first activity before we even started reading the book. Lou Gehrig referred to himself as the luckiest man alive. And someone might think that's ironic, because who's lucky that gets ALS? Who's lucky that gets a disease that shuts your body down, but your brain is still very much alive? So it's almost like you're 100% up here, but you're in a stone body. But he said that he was so lucky, Lou Gehrig did, because of all the experiences that he has had in his life so far. The people that he has had the chance to love, and those people that loved him back, and all the memories that he made in baseball. That's why he was the luckiest man alive. It was the memories associated with baseball. It wasn't the money that he made. It was the people and the love. And I think that goes back to what Morrie has been trying to teach us in this whole book. It's about the people and the love. It's not about the money and the cars and the cell phones. It's about everything else. Okay, the kind of ironic thing is that Morrie's disease is named after a baseball player. Morrie is not into sports, okay? It's kind of like me. He's into books and education and psychology and English and politics and stuff like that. He's not really into sports. So that's why it's a little ironic that this disease would be named after a baseball player. We can see Morrie declining a little bit more here. It says that his handwriting is shaky. He's on oxygen full time now because he can't breathe on his own. So we see that. And we see the Oj Simpson trial happening in the background. Now, this was kind of emotional for me when I was rereading this chapter, preparing for this video. As you guys might know, if you read your Google Classroom, my grandma just died a couple days ago. And we had her funeral, and I wasn't able to say goodbye because of the COVID stuff. And she did die of COVID. She was on her way out. She had had a stroke over the summer, but we were going to set her up with hospice, and we were going to bring her home for Christmas. And it wasn't going to be a glorious Christmas, but she was still going to be able to see us open up our gifts and stuff. But she got COVID, and it took her sooner than what she thought was going to happen. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, everyone. I paused the video and now I'm back. I'm not very good at video editing, as those of you that had me last spring would know, so I just have to stop if things like that happen. So anyways, yes, my grandma, she just passed away of COVID. It was very hard to say goodbye, to not be able to say goodbye. And, you know, we thought we were going to be able to bring her home for Christmas, but the COVID took her quicker than we thought. Which this kind of goes back to what Morrie is saying. Make sure that the people you love know that you love them. But anyways, the Oj Simpson trial, she watched it every day. And I remember going to her house when she babysat me and watching it with her, and she videotaped it as well. It was a huge thing. He was found not guilty. I feel like maybe he was guilty, but I mean, what do I know? I was a kid at the time. I'm not a lawyer. I would have to completely research the trial again. It was said that the reason why, the phrase was, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit, because these gloves had like his wife's blood on them and things like that. And it was said that the reason why the gloves did not fit him it was because his lawyer, fancy lawyer, Johnny Cochran, told him not to take his medicine for his arthritis. So his hands swelled up because he was a professional football player. And that's why the gloves didn't fit. Anyways, Morrie repeats something kind of throughout this chapter and throughout the book that Mitch Albom tells us about, which is that everyone knows that they're going to die, but no one believes it. No one thinks that this will be the day. Everyone keeps putting everything off. They don't have a will. They don't tell the people that they love them, that they really love them, and things like that. And he says that, you know, one way that you could live is live like the Buddhists do. And they have a little bird on their shoulder that says, like, will this be the day that I die? I'm not so sure, but I'm going to make sure that I'm ready if I am. They live every day like it's going to be their last, and they make sure that their affairs are in order, that if they die, that they have no unfinished business, that they haven't stayed angry with anyone like that. Nothing, they don't have any regrets when they go to the grave. That's how the Buddhists live. And we know that Morrie was raised Jewish. But the reason why he's quoting Buddhists right now is because he has become an agnostic man. And basically, what an agnostic person is that they're not necessarily religious, but they're spiritual. They believe that there probably is a higher power or powers, gods and goddesses and things like that. And someone had to create us, but they're not exactly sure necessarily which is the correct religion or which is the right version of God. So they're not going to say that they're Christian. They're not going to say that they're Jewish. They're not going to say that they're Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or anything like that, or even like a Satanist. They're not going to say that. They just say that they're spiritual. They know that there's a higher power there. They just don't know how to describe that higher power. And they don't necessarily believe in maybe we should get baptized and this type of prayer and all this stuff like that. They're open to all kinds of different religions, Wiccan, maybe even like ancient Greek mythology or something. They're open to all of it. Okay?
Sure, the people who believe in the more conventional religious life, I think they have a hard time. God's going to take care of them. But if you don't believe in that, what do you do? One of the things I've said before, you know, it really doesn't matter what you believe, except insofar as you're getting comfort from it. Because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. If there is a soul, you'll be a soul. If there is an afterlife, you go to the afterlife. Whether you believe it or not doesn't make one iota of difference.
I like this quotation that he says. It says, the truth is, if you listen to that bird, that Buddhist bird on your shoulder, if you accept that you can die at any time, then you might not be as ambitious as you are. He's saying this to Mitch. He says, the things that you spend so much time on all of this work that you do, because we know that Mitch is a workaholic, might not seem as important. You might have to make room for some more spiritual things, the touchy-feely stuff that he has talked about before. All right, so I'm going to end this video with a little information here about the Oj Simpson trial. I know it seems silly, but it's important that we put our text in the place in history of when it was written. Nothing's written in a vacuum. Everything that is going on in the world has influence on Mitch Albom when he was writing this book. Enjoy.
This is Orenthal James Simpson, better known as Oj Simpson. Oj Simpson, an American football player and Heisman Trophy winner, meets his future wife, Nicole Brown, at a private bar in Beverly Hills in 1977. The two clicked right off the bat, even though Oj was still married with his first wife. The two dated for 2 years while he was still married until he finally divorced his first wife on March of 1979. Nicole and Oj married in 1985 and were married for 7 years until 1992. Oj was said to be controlling, emotionally abusive, and had numerous affairs during their marriage. This eventually resulted in their divorce, but Oj was not yet done with his ex-wife. At one point, Nicole started seeing Keith Zausowicz. Oj was said to be seen following them and confronting them multiple times. According to Robin Greer, a close friend of Brown, he had watched her have sexual relations with a man through her window and confronted his ex-wife about it the next day. June 13th, 1994. Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman are found dead at 12:10 a.m. outside Nicole's Bundy Drive condominium in Brentwood area of Los Angeles, California. Oj Simpson is charged with 2 accounts of murder. Following these accusations, he tries to escape the police in a white Ford Bronco. A low-speed chase happens and is broadcasted live as millions listen in from their homes. After hours, Oj finally surrenders and gives himself to the police. July 22nd, 1994. Oj pleads, quote-unquote, absolutely 100% not guilty. Judge Lance Ito is assigned to the trial. On November 3rd, 1994, the jury was selected. And on January 23rd of 1995, the opening statements from defense and prosecution were made. There were 4 men and 8 women that were selected for the jury. 8 black, 1 Hispanic, 1 white, and 2 people of mixed race. On February 3rd through the 6th, Denise Brown, aka victim Nicole Brown's sister, testifies Simpson had been abusive towards her younger sister. On February 7th, 1995, Nicole's neighbor testifies and says he heard the sound of a dog's plaintive wail coming from near her house around 10:15, which was the estimated time of the murders. From March 8th to the 15th, DNA lab director Robin Cotton links DNA evidence at the crime scene to Oj. And from March 9th to the 16th of 1995, Detective Mark Furman testifies that he found bloody gloves at Oj's estate. During this time, he also finds it necessary to testify he has not used a racial slur in the past 10 years. From March 22nd to March 28th of 1995, Oj's house guest, Brian K. Lynn, testifies he last saw Oj at 9:35 and claimed he had been upset with Nicole earlier that evening. On March 28th, Oj's limo driver testifies that he didn't answer the door until nearly 11 p.m. the night of the murder. And from June 2nd to June 15th of 1995, the coroner gives the jury a detailed description of the murders, how it was committed, as well as graphic photos from the crime scene. On July 24th of 1995, a forensic toxicologist says he found evidence of blood preservation in 2 pieces of evidence, giving viable proof to the claim that police may have planted evidence. And from August 22nd to the 28th of 1995, Henry Lee, a forensic expert, testifies to seeing 3 shoe prints at the crime scene that didn't match Oj's particular shoes, which were Bruno Maglin's. And on August 29th of 1995, there was a recorded interview between Detective Furman, aka the detective trying to prove Oj guilty, and the screenwriter Laura Hart. This was played with the jury absent. Throughout the recording, Furman used the N-word a whopping 41 times. This is not the only time the detective has been mildly suspicious. When he was in questioning from the defense, he was asked 3 separate questions, and to all of them he answered with, "I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege." He was asked, "Was the testimony that you gave at the preliminary hearing in this case completely truthful?" As well as, "Have you ever falsified a police report?" And most strikingly, "Did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?" And following all 3 of these questions, he answered, "I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege." The prosecution made a decision to make OJ try on gloves found at the crime scene. The gloves were found to be far too small for OJ's hands and was considered a monumental mistake for the prosecutors. Following these results, OJ's attorney, Johnny Cochran, says the famous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." 6 days later, on October 3rd, the verdict of not guilty was announced and OJ is set free.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
So OJ was set free. Yet still, no one was 100% sure exactly what happened that famous night.